In September 2008, a 158-year-old bank collapsed almost overnight. In the chaos, $600 billion disappeared, retirement savings were wiped out, and millions of people lost their jobs. But the real question is this: how did it all begin? The answer starts with a promise so simple it sounded harmless. Why rent when you can own? Travel back to the early 2000s. America was still recovering from the dot-com crash and the shock of 9/11s. The economy was shaky and Wall Street was nervous. To keep things moving, the Federal Reserve made borrowing incredibly cheap by cutting interest rates to near zero. Suddenly, money was easy. Loans were everywhere. Buying a home felt risk-free. And before anyone realized it, housing replaced baseball as America's favorite obsession. This is the story of how good intentions, cheap money, and one powerful idea quietly built the biggest financial disaster in modern history, and why it still matters today. Imagine being approved for a $500,000 loan when your household income is only $40,000 a year. Sounds crazy, right? But back in the early 2000s, it wasn't just possible. It was normal. Adjustable rates, balloon payments, and even ninja loans. Loans with no income, no job, no assets were everywhere. Owning a home wasn't just having a roof over your head. It was the American dream. Stability, status, and suburban bliss. Everywhere you looked, ads, billboards, mortgage seminars. The message was the same. Why rent when you can own? Banks loved it. They threw money at people like it was a game show, and everyone felt like a winner. But as history would show, this easy money housing boom came with hidden risks that changed millions of lives forever. Welcome to the subprime mortgage boom. Loans for anyone, even if you had bad credit, no credit, or barely any money at all. Imagine living in a van and still qualifying for a luxury condo. Repaying, not really a concern. If you defaulted, the bank just sold the house for more. It was a housing gold rush. Prices soared overnight, and your neighbor's home could double in value in just 6 months. Even McDonald's workers and baristas with almost nothing in savings were approved for mortgages. Rules were ignored, risks were ignored, and everyone was caught up in the frenzy. It seemed like the American dream was within everyone's reach, until the cracks in the system became impossible to ignore. In the early 2000s, traditional lending was too slow and risk assessments too boring. Down payments optional. If you had a pulse, you could get a mortgage. People bought houses like ramen noodles, and lenders handed out loans like monopoly money. Mortgage brokers earned commissions faster than anyone could say bubble, all fueled by the blind belief that housing prices would always rise, because, well, they always had, until now. But behind the open houses, granite countertops, and flashing for sale signs, one question lingered. What could possibly go wrong? Spoiler alert, everything. And this is just the beginning of the story that changed the American economy forever. By 2005, buying a house wasn't about stability anymore. It was about flipping it fast, hoping the next buyer would pay double. Real estate wasn't just a home. It had become a national obsession, and a lottery ticket. Teachers, baristas, and part-time workers were buying condos they didn't even live in, chasing quick profits. Buy, flip, profit, repeat. Prices kept soaring, and more people rushed in, fueling the frenzy like throwing gasoline on a fire. Behind the excitement, however, the foundation was rotten. Subprime mortgages were risky, barely verified, and toxic. But Wall Street had a trick: bundle them, label them safe, and sell them as mortgage-backed securities. Ratings agencies gave them AAA ratings, even though they were filled with bankrupt baristas and unemployed workers, because the banks were paying them to say so. And they didn't stop there. These shaky loans were repackaged into CDOs, collateralized debt obligations, creating a financial house of cards ready to collapse. This is the story of greed, leverage, and the point of no return that led to the biggest financial crisis of modern times. Through a mix of financial trickery, toxic subprime loans were turned into seemingly safe investment-grade assets. Most investors bought the hype, but a few skeptics and troublemakers read the fine print and saw the rot beneath the boom. Instead of joining the frenzy, they asked a bold question: what if we bet against it? There wasn't a product for that yet, so they went straight to Wall Street and demanded a solution. These loans are garbage. Can you make something that pays us if they fail? The answer: insurance called credit default swaps. You pay monthly, and if nothing happens, the banks keep your money. Everyone wins, especially the banks. Or so they thought. After all, it wasn't like the entire housing market could collapse, right? This is the story of financial genius, skepticism, and a bet that would change everything. Wall Street smelled easy money and ignored the warnings. They didn't believe the skeptics, but they loved the steady fees. So they invented credit default swaps, insurance on mortgages they didn't even own. It was like betting on your neighbor's grandma to fall down the stairs. The system became a tower of lies and leverage, with every risky mortgage stacked higher and higher, and the top layer cheered on record bonuses while ethics took a back seat. Whistleblowers were ignored, regulators slept, and the greedy partied on. Then the cracks appeared: missed mortgages, empty condos, foreclosures. By 2007, the housing market bubble imploded. Subprime loans, packaged as safe investments, exploded like financial plutonium. Banks realized they were holding radioactive junk. Panic spread, and Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old bank, collapsed, leaving a $600 billion crater on Wall Street. Suddenly, credit froze. Businesses couldn't pay salaries. Families lost homes. Investors lost 401ks, and life savings vanished. The American dream turned into a nightmare, and the global economy froze overnight. By late 2008, the job market vanished, and the economy was in full collapse mode. Millions lost their jobs. Foreclosures skyrocketed, and eviction notices piled up like junk mail. Soup kitchens overflowed, and unemployment offices felt like disaster zones. This wasn't just Wall Street burning. This was Main Street free-falling. The crisis went global. Iceland's banks collapsed, Tokyo stocks plummeted, and leaders across Europe and beyond scrambled to respond. From London to Reykjavik, Tokyo to São Paulo markets crashed, banks buckled, and economies spiraled. Suddenly, the question wasn't who's next. It was, is the entire system broken? The Great Recession had officially begun, changing lives worldwide forever. In October 2008, the U.S. government faced an impossible choice: let the financial system burn or throw billions of taxpayer dollars at the very banks that caused the disaster. They chose the latter, launching the $700 billion Troubled Asset Relief Program (TARP), a massive lifeline to keep Wall Street from collapsing and dragging the global economy down with it. It wasn't just banks. GM, and Chrysler received billions in emergency aid. The Federal Reserve cut interest rates to near zero and unleashed quantitative easing, essentially printing money to stabilize the system. It worked for Wall Street. Markets calmed, banks recovered, and the stock market started climbing. Meanwhile, Main Street was still choking on smoke. Unemployment hit 10%. 8 million jobs vanished. 4 million homes were foreclosed, and $19 trillion in household wealth disappeared. Families struggled, while the people responsible for the crisis got bonuses and bailouts. The anger boiled over. By 2011, thousands marched in Zuccotti Park, New York City, waving signs reading, "We are the 99%. This is the story of rescue, rage, and the fight for justice after the Great Recession." The 2008 crisis wasn't just about bailouts. It exposed a system rigged to protect the powerful. Profits were privatized, losses were socialized, and justice was nowhere in sight. No major Wall Street CEO went to jail. Instead, they walked away with golden parachutes and quiet retirements. The system survived, but trust burned to the ground. A generation grew up learning a harsh lesson. When banks mess up, they get rescued. When ordinary people mess up, they get crushed. The 2008 crash showed us one thing clearly: the next financial crisis won't look obvious until it's too late. The 2008 U.S. financial crisis was a perfect storm of greed, risky lending, and unchecked financial engineering. Millions of Americans lost jobs, homes, and life savings, while Wall Street banks were bailed out and executives walked away with golden parachutes. It revealed a system rigged to protect the powerful, eroding trust in institutions and leaving lasting scars on Main Street. The Great Recession reshaped the economy, showing that financial bubbles, toxic debt, and unchecked speculation can bring the world to its knees, and that the next crisis is always lurking, disguised as something harmless, until it explodes. It's a story of risk, collapse, rescue, and the hard lessons America and the world can't afford to forget.